The economy is taking center stage in the presidential race. Tomorrow, Vice President Kamala Harris travels to North Carolina to unveil her economic plans, including a proposed federal ban on corporate price gouging on food and groceries. Former President Donald Trump, meantime, made a campaign stop in Asheville, North Carolina yesterday, where he outlined his economic plan. Trump used Tic Tacs to demonstrate inflation under the Biden administration, but still veered off topic to attack President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. A CBS News reporter, Zak Hudak, is joining us now to talk a little bit more about this. Always good to see you, Zak. So let's first dig into Kamala Harris's plan for a federal ban on price gouging when it comes to groceries. This kind of reminds me of kind of a Biden style of thing. Like, you know, Biden went after those junk fees, those kind of irritating things that you talk about at work, you know, with your coworkers. Dig into this plan. How would it work? Could it work?
Anne-Marie, we don't have a lot of the details, but what we do have is the broad outline. There are two main facets to this plan. The first is that they would impose fines, harsh fines, they say, penalties on companies that price gouge when it comes to groceries and food products. What price gouging exactly would entail, that would have to be defined by Congress. But the general outline is that there would be fines for companies that price gouge. The second piece, I think, is actually more interesting, which is that they would closely watch mergers between these food companies and meat processing companies and such to try to minimize consolidation. That actually, I think, is reminiscent even of some of Elizabeth Warren's plans. It doesn't go as far as she would have. She would probably be calling for breaking up some of those larger companies. But it is reminiscent of that. So both Biden and Warren, we're seeing this kind of, you know, let's take on problems that are affecting everyday Americans. And it's in large part a response to the attacks Trump has had on the Biden-Harris administration and where prices are at.
Really interesting. All right, let's talk Trump now. He also did a speech and he outlined his economic plans should he be reelected. What were the major takeaways?
The major takeaway is that he is saying, are you better off now than you were with me? And that is him, as we were just talking about, pointing to where the prices are at. In terms of actual economic policies, he's talking about imposing large tariffs on foreign countries that are importing goods. There's a lot of debate over whether that would actually be effective, but it is very different from the Biden-Harris approach. And it, again, is really him saying, look at where the economics are, look at who's in charge, and did you feel better when I was in charge?
All right, let's talk about the vice presidential nominees. J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, heading to Pennsylvania, battleground state. We expect to see Pennsylvania be visited many, many times before November. But he was also on Fox News, and he didn't really make it clear whether or not he would be participating in the vice presidential debate, which is going to be on CBS News. It's scheduled, or CBS rather, it's scheduled for October 1st. Tim Walz already committed. What did Vance have to say about this?
Senator Vance is saying that he wants to work out the parameters of how the debate would take place. One of the things that he wants in particular is to have a live audience. Both he and Trump have vented in the past about not having audiences, and Trump himself has pushed for having an even larger audience than there typically is. That is Vance and Trump playing to their strengths. These are candidates who like to have rallies, and they are at their best when they can rile up a crowd. But I think we have to keep in mind here, when push comes to shove, these folks are going to debate because if one of them pulls out, they will frankly look afraid to the American people, and they know that they cannot do that.
Before I let you go, got to ask you about independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. There is some reporting out there that he reached out to the Harris campaign wanting to have a meeting, and so far it hasn't worked out. What have you learned?
We know that the Harris campaign was not up for the meeting, and we also know that a few weeks ago at the RNC in Milwaukee, RFK Jr. met with former President Trump. So this sort of meeting has already happened. I don't think we should be surprised by this because I think that Kennedy sees the writing on the wall. He does not have a legitimate chance of winning the presidency. But I think what he realizes, and he's hoping that that VP Harris and former President Trump realize, is that in some of these states that could decide the election, Pennsylvania, for instance, the past two cycles, that state was decided by less than 100,000 votes. So RFK being in that race could theoretically pull that state and therefore perhaps the election to one of those candidates or the other. We don't really know for sure which one it would be. We might know closer which one he would more likely help, but he is doubling down on this stage on the idea that by backing one of them, he might be able to be that final little push that gives them victory.
Interesting. Zak Hudak, thank you. Just a reminder to everyone, the Democratic National Convention kicks off next week. CBS News will have special coverage of the events in Chicago starting Monday, August 19th at 5 p.m. Eastern.